Like, there will be a headline that's like, Donald Trump choked DOD official for not letting him bomb cartels. And then all these GOP challengers will tweet something like, leadership is about experience. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, who's this for? Okay. Whew. Is this thing on? No, I'm kidding. Hello everyone. Making my video and audio debut here for the Campaign Dispatch. So, hello. I thought, it wasn't enough to poison the political media ecosystem with my villainously long think pieces. Now we are expanding our horizons to poisoning the video media ecosystem. So today we are going to be ranking the Republican candidates for president in 2024. And obviously, there are a few disclaimers to this. The first is that I am not a Republican. I don't know if anyone was under the impression that I was, but just in case there was any ambiguity, I am not a Republican. So take my views on this with a grain of salt. The second is I am not doing this based on who's going to win the primary, because I think we all know that Donald Trump is going to win the primary. My opinion is that he's going to sweep all 50 states in the GOP primary. That's just my opinion. Some people say 49, like DeSantis will take Florida. I just don't see that. But as it stands today, I think Donald Trump's going to win the primary, but I really think he's going to lose the general election to Joe Biden. I'm going to be grading, I think it's 13 or 14 candidates. It's all of the ones who are considered serious candidates on the Wikipedia article, except Perry Johnson, who I don't consider to be a serious candidate, because obviously you have never heard of him if you have a life and you're not like embroiled in politics like I am. I am grading each candidate like a letter grade, like if I were grading a paper, so F through A+. And I am grading them based on their primary election prospects, their general election prospects, and then their overall score. And obviously, those are subjective matters. So if you have a disagreement, that is like a given. So I respect that, is what I'm saying. I know that none of my OG mailing list people would, but if I make the decision to put this out into the broad spectrum of the internet, I fully expect some people to have a problem with, actually, maybe you should have given Nikki Haley an A- instead of an A+. It's just like, anyway, what I would consider to be strong for a candidate is their story, right? So they're like their stump speech, their why. So like, why are you running for president, right? Why do you want to be president? Their message, their communication strategy, their political strategy, fundraising is another big one. Overall vibes and temperament, because it wouldn't be a political analysis video without vibes and temperament, because that's really what drives political predictions at this point where we have such a drought in quality polling. But in any event, I am going to go ahead and start grading these candidates, and we are going in the order that they announced their runs for president. So up first, we have Donald John Trump. Okay, so Donald Trump, the twice impeached, 2.5 times indicted, waiting this coming week from any news out of D.C. over Jack Smith's fake electors, seditious conspiracy investigation. We'll probably see the third indictment soon. I think there will be 4 overall, including Ms. Fannie Willis. But in any event, Donald John Trump, 45th president of the United States, lost in 2020, was first to announce in a pretty awful announcement. He looked like he had just taken an Ativan, and he was disheveled. He was clearly banking on a red wave midterm having happened. So everyone was mad at him because a red wave didn't happen. And then he was like, well, I already got the prepackaged BLTs for the people who are coming to my announcement, so I might as well give it, Fox News cut him off. Y'all remember that? It's crazy. Anyway, Donald J. Trump is the front runner for the Republican nomination. So I absolutely give him an A+ for this Republican primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Look, this is what I will say, is with very few exceptions, and I will note those exceptions when they come up, the lower the primary rating, the higher quality the candidate is as a person, okay? That is where the Republican primary electorate is at this point. And this reminds me of something like there's this conception that Donald Trump is what's driving the Republican base. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. But it's also true that he is a manifestation of grievance politics, the far right, frankly, borderline fascistic elements of the Republican base. He is, and I've said this for a long time, he is the capstone of the Tea Party movement. And I think he just came at a time that was earlier than we thought. This was something Republicans had been dealing with for a long time, is they had a fairly large tent, and the sort of white nationalist fringe dark side of their base was something they ignored and said it's not a problem, it's not a significant voting base, and yet they've taken over the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is their strongman. What they give him is his ego, and what he gives them is something to get fired up about. But in any event, what I'm trying to say is there is a great deal that is detached from actual policy here. This is why it's not working for candidates like Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis to try and run to the right of Donald Trump on policy, because it's really mostly about, are you conservative in the first place? And if you are, do you have the temperament to like own the libs and be a strong man? And he's not afraid of saying anything. And that's appealing to this Republican base, is they want a strong man, and they don't care if the manifestation that they get that in is a sleazy billionaire who pays hush money to porn stars and is a hypocrite and whatever. So long story short, this is the party of Donald Trump, the personality, just as much as it's the party of Donald Trump, the politician, and like the Trumpist policy. So yeah, that's where I put it. So yeah, A+ in the primary for Donald Trump. He loves to say this in TV interviews. He'll say, well, Reagan didn't do primary debates. Nixon didn't when he was running for re-election. And the thing is, you're not running for re-election. You're running for election. But to the Republican base who think that the election was stolen from him, in every sense of the term, he is the incumbent. And so that's why it's difficult for a lot of these Republican challengers, is because these people like Trump, they don't see anything wrong with him. The Republican Party as a national organization has not conducted a single moratorium on its major election losses in 2018, 2020, or 2022. 3 very disappointing federal elections for the Republicans. And they did not think that anything with their message or their strategy went wrong to constitute the necessity for a moratorium on what actually happened during those elections. For reference, after 2020, when Democrats won the House but lost seats, there was this huge autopsy, multi-million-dollar project by the DCCC to try and figure out what went wrong. Ultimately, it looks like it worked to their benefit in 2022, where they were able to hold the line in the House. But the fact of the matter remains that this Republican Party is not interested in finding a solution to why they're not performing well at all. So there's this perception in the base of like, everything is fine, there's nothing to worry about, Donald Trump is the incumbent, we just renominate him, whatever. He has something we can work with. And it's like, well, no, you can't work with it because it doesn't work, and not everything is fine. Like, here's an example of how Donald Trump is operating in this primary. It's like, he's just like he's assuming he's the alpha. That's so bad. I can't believe I just said that. Basically, he's like acting like a front runner, which is important. It's almost as important as being the front runner, is acting like the front runner. So like, here's an example. Last week, there was an event for an evangelical organization in Iowa, and all of the Republican candidates showed up except, Donald Trump. You guessed it. And where was he? He was doing a Turning Point USA conference, and Turning Point USA is Charlie Kirk's organization, his MAGA youth conference thing. And that was in Florida. But you know what the news covered? They covered the Turning Point USA conference. They did not cover the Iowa thing, except this snippet of Tucker Carlson just going at Mike Pence.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, I know you're running for president. You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased, and yet your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. Right. I think it's a fair question to ask, like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
God, it's like personal, I think.
You are distressed.
Okay, so A+ in the primary. I'm going to give him a D+ in the general election.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
And this is another opportunity to use my hobby horse of the fact that the GOP is in a significantly compromised electoral position. That being said, there is a higher than we would like chance of Donald Trump becoming president. For reference, and this might shock some people if they're not super in on like election Twitter and stuff like that. But among DeSantis, Mike Pence, and Donald Trump, I would be most concerned about Donald Trump being the nominee because he has an ability to connect with white working class voters. That was something that was proven in 2020, 2016, something that was rebuked by Democrats. We gained back a lot of ground in 2022, 2018, but it all depends on how the campaign is run. And I just think DeSantis or Mike Pence would not be able to fight Democrats in the Rust Belt in the way that Donald Trump would be able to. I still expect Democrats to sweep the Rust Belt, but the margins would be a lot closer with Donald Trump as a nominee. Donald Trump's ability to connect with the Rust Belt voters that are really the centerpiece of Biden's campaign, you can tell, you know, with Bidenomics and like going around touting infrastructure, unions, stuff like that. It's very clear that Joe Biden's interested in centering his campaign in the Midwest and white working class voters, which I think is smart. But Donald Trump's position in the Electoral College, like my belief on this is like Donald Trump is the nominee. Immediately, Joe Biden is favored in Arizona, Georgia, Colorado, Virginia, New Hampshire, especially in these suburban areas. Like already Donald Trump is just on the defense. And I think in a state like Texas, with Donald Trump on the ballot, especially if his running mate is someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Carrie Lake, we're talking about a very, very bad situation for Republicans, which in my opinion is a good situation for the country. But because he has this sort of ability to connect with white working class voters, I would put probably Donald Trump in a D+ position. But if it weren't for that, I would say, sorry, baby, sorry, sweetie, sorry, honey bun, like, it's not looking good. So given that, overall, I would give Donald Trump a C- rating.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
A C- rating, which I think is fitting for his electoral weaknesses and strengths sort of taken into account, as well as his just the way that he's dominating this primary. It's very clear that this is Donald Trump's Republican Party because Trump isn't very good at many things, but he is really good at running his campaign in this primary. Like I said, there's a symbiotic relationship between the Republican base and the personality and the brand of Donald Trump. So, all right. Next, we have Nikki Haley.
I think that we can all be very clear and say with a matter of fact that if you vote for Joe Biden, you really are counting on a President Harris, because the idea that he would make it until 86 years old is not something that I think is likely.
Okay, so Nikki Haley is the former UN ambassador. She's former governor of South Carolina. She's someone who is not going to win the Republican nomination. I'll give you that much. But I think I would be worried about her against Joe Biden in a general election. So yeah, I think she really represents this sort of old guard of the Republican Party. So I give her a C- for the primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
She's of South Asian descent. She's young, not according to Don Lemon.
Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry.
But she is young. After the Mitt Romney loss in 2012, she was the sitting governor of South Carolina. At that time, there was this feeling after Mitt Romney lost in the Republican Party, okay, we need to be a socially liberal party, we need to be diverse, and we need to just move away from these culture wars and things like that. And obviously that didn't go as planned. And I wrote all about this in my article about Nikki Haley. She doesn't have the support. She represents something of a bygone era. And if I were her, I would be not doing this. Because she's talking about woke, she's talking about trans people, and it's just like, you are so clearly trying to be something you're not, and you're alienating the very people that you could be bringing to the table by talking about social issues like that. So I wish she was a little bit less fake. I wish she was less fake. And I think she would be wise to stay on the sidelines and just wait, because there's a very real possibility that in the next decade or so, the Republican Party wakes up from this and recognizes they have to really fundamentally change their party. And I think she could be a very qualified, she's very experienced. We have to remember this too. She was a 2-term, very successful, very popular governor in South Carolina. She served in the United Nations, so she has serious foreign policy chops, which is not typical of a governor. It's like she knows how to like talk to the national press, the global press at that. So her value as a candidate, I think, is underrated. But her value as a candidate in this Republican primary is very poor, which, like I said, is a testament to her character, I think. So anyway, in any event, I think she should have just waited, because this is not fertile ground for mounting a Nikki Haley campaign. And I think that ground can exist. So yeah, C- in the primary, though. For the general election, I give her an A-.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
I would be really, really worried about Nikki Haley going up against Joe Biden in a general election. Not only because she's got this ability to, I think, connect with suburban voters and make people feel like they can trust the direction that the Republican Party is going in, but also because she might be able to bring together an interesting coalition. Like in the state of Georgia, for example, part of Brian Kemp's winning coalition for governor in 2022 was South Asian voters. And so this is particularly across the country, Asian voters and South Asian voters in particular are becoming increasingly influential in our elections, and she might be able to put together a winning coalition in some of these, pretty important states. I don't want to go full fash here. I would trust Nikki Haley to make the right decision in a high-pressure situation. I think that a policy agenda of a Haley administration might be bad. But, if Donald Trump is in the Situation Room and there's, we're on the brink of war, I'm, in the bunker already. With Nikki Haley, I'm okay. So, with an A- general, C- primary, I would give Nikki Haley a B- overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
I think she's a pretty quality candidate. That being said, what did I say about the inverse correlation between quality in my book and quality in, a Republican primary? She might not even make it to Iowa at this point. That's where I put Nikki Haley, B-. All right, next we have Vivek Ramaswamy, who you may have begun to hear about more and more.
I've talked about my plans to shut down the administrative state, but we're just getting warmed up. And one agency I've been waiting for a long time to expose and to ultimately gut is much of the FDA itself.
So Vivek Ramaswamy is a businessman from Ohio. He's a multi-billionaire. He said that he is willing to lend his own campaign as much as $100 million to get to where he needs to go. He is leading in recent polls. He was tied with Ron DeSantis in a Kaplan poll that I saw the other day. He is really overtaking Ron DeSantis because DeSantis is flopping. Yeah, Vivek is interesting. I remember seeing him announcing for president and being like, oh, this guy who's literally never done politics before? Good luck. Right? Good luck. But if you didn't know, you'd be surprised to learn that he has no political experience. Because to me, it seems like he really has political instincts. Or maybe he just has really good staff because he's rich and he can pay staff. What I think is so interesting about Vivek is he's doing something no one else is doing in this primary. It seems sort of slightly off-center, in a way that I think to people like me is kind of unsettling, but to bystanders and voters is a good thing. Someone who is young, has some sort of eye-catching ideas, like Vivek has the idea of raising the voting age to 25. I think that the fact that he's a young outsider who is interested in coming in and doing big things is a political framework we've seen before, but it's almost always compelling. He seems like sort of a techno-populist or something. To a certain extent also, I think, and there are limits to what I'm saying here because I think it's an insult to Mayor Pete to try and compare Vivek to Pete Buttigieg, but I think that in many ways, the way he's running his campaign reminds me of Pete Buttigieg, in that he's got something that people have undervalued, and if there's anyone who might pull an upset here, it's him. That really informs his scoring because it seems like from a political strategy standpoint, he's got the goods. So I think in the primary election, I'm going to give Vivek an A+.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Now, this might be controversial, but Vivek is going around doing interviews. It doesn't seem like he's saying no. He's had a profile in Politico. He's done interviews on CNN, MSNBC. He is making the rounds. He has a bus. He's going around and doing the retail politics, which is something that Pete Buttigieg did. He really understands that he's not known. I expect his campaign has all of this polling that shows low name ID, but among people who have heard of him, very positive things, which is an interesting place for a candidate to be. It's the place where Barack Obama was before he won the Iowa caucuses, right? Not saying Vivek is Obama material because he certainly isn't, but if you have low name ID but high favorables with people who know who you are, the only thing is getting yourself out there and that you have the goods politically to do well once your voice is out on the airwaves. And I think that the way that he's strategizing and running his campaign and sort of toiling away little by little over time, that's a good strategy for someone like him who just needs to raise his name ID. And so I think he's doing that well. And I think in a general election, he'd probably do C+.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Like I said, he's really kind of populist, so he would probably be able to get a lot of younger people to vote Republican, mostly young men, I think, which could be interesting. I think also he might do well with working class voters. He's a billionaire. Right. And this is the other thing is you go to his website and you go to the issues page. It's here, I'll just pull it up and read it to you. This is so bad. Right under a quote that says, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." That's Thomas Jefferson. He says, God is real. There are two genders. Human flourishing requires fossil fuels. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is no border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Capitalism lifts people up from poverty. There are 3 branches of the U.S. government, not 4. I don't know who's trying to say that there are 4 branches of government.
The FDA.
That seems like pretty basic civics. And the U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history. Like, okay, buddy. It just reads like, yeah, I don't really do the 2-party dichotomy. It's kind of a false choice. Really, he's like just a hardcore conservative. That's what it reads like. So, A+ primary, C+ general. I think Vivek is a B- overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
I think he's a pretty strong candidate, and he's, at the very least, has the staff to tell him what to do. All right, next we've got poor old Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas. Former Bush administration DEA director or administrator, or forget what it is. Sort of an old guard Republican. He's running an anti-Trump campaign openly. He is a little bit more moderate on social issues. He vetoed a transgender care ban in the Arkansas legislature when he was governor. And now he's been replaced by the political luminary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Thanks, guys. Sarah. 1-minute briefing, Sarah.
Do your job, Sarah.
So yeah, because he is running an anti-Trump campaign, unfortunately, I have to give him an F in the primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Because it's just not tenable in this political environment, unfortunately. But I feel bad giving him an F because he's kind of strikes me as a sweet old man. Maybe I'm just falling for the trap. Maybe he's a real fash. Anyway, D+ in the general election.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
There was a picture his campaign posted on Twitter that really made me laugh. And it was a picture of him at an event in Iowa. And there are 5 people in the room. 5. And his campaign tweeted it. Embarrassing. It's embarrassing. He clearly isn't running a very savvy campaign, so I would give him a D overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Not great for Asa Hutchinson. Not great.
And you know
There's
what?
that. Oh my God.
What was that? Okay, James.
Oh my God. Sorry. Okay. Larry Elder
What was that?
is the next candidate. He and Ron DeSantis are the only people on this list who I am physically averse to. Ugh. Just get me riled up. I don't know why. So Larry Elder is a former libertarian. He's been around for a long time. Just sort of like that guy who comes up every now and again. It's like, oh, I forgot about you. You're crazy, right? He was a libertarian for a while. I think he ran for president as a libertarian. I forget. He has said some pretty misogynistic things in the past. And he ran for governor of California in 2021 in the recall against Gavin Newsom. And everyone said he was going to, at the very least, come too close for comfort for Gavin Newsom. And he ended up losing to Newsom in a landslide. So, yeah. Also, I haven't seen him campaign at all. Nothing from Larry Elder on the campaigning front. I don't even really know he's not running a campaign, it doesn't seem like. I shouldn't have even put him on the list because he's not a serious candidate. He is not out there campaigning. He's not raising money. He just wants to be the center of attention, and he's a giant flop.
You need to leave.
Yeah, Larry Elder, big fat flop. F is for flop. Floptina Aguilerta, because he lost huge to Gavin Newsom in a recall in 2021 when Joe Biden's approvals were in the tank, when Republicans won the governorship in Virginia. So Larry Elder, a.k.a. Floptina Aguilera. Sorry, it's so bad. F's all around, general, primary, overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Hey, Flop.
Bad candidate. Is he even running for president? Or is he just accidentally filled this out instead of his tax returns? He just filled out a paperwork to run for president. Next, we got Tim Scott.
Hello, North Charleston!
The junior U.S. Senator from South Carolina. Tim Scott is an interesting candidate. He is right now, as the sort of faith from the establishment is sort of draining out of Ron DeSantis' campaign, Tim Scott is actually picking up a lot of support. He already has the endorsement of a top Senate Republican, South Dakota Senator John Thune, who's the minority whip of the U.S. Senate. He's got some high-profile endorsements. The establishment really likes him, and it really seems like his colleagues in the Senate sort of coaxed him into running, because with some notable exceptions, the Senate Republican Conference, I think, is pretty done with Donald Trump, at the very least behind closed doors. And so I think that they're rallying behind Tim Scott. For the primary, I would give him a C-.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
His personality isn't all there.
I can't hear ya! I can't hear ya! I can't hear ya! Oh, yeah.
He just like comes off as awkward at times.
Oh, yeah.
He's the ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee. So like clearly he's like really good at policy making and he's smart, but he doesn't have a lot of like camera facing savvy. Maybe that's something that can be fixed. It's just his announcement video was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
More so than I think any other candidate. His campaign is really about his own story in America, having a single mom, growing up in North Charleston, South Carolina, you know, working hard, playing by the rules, making it to the U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate. And I think that that's an inspiring message overall for a general election, but in a primary, I'll give him a C-. Inspiring message, maybe not the best vessel. What he's selling really is not something that the Republican base is buying anymore. That message, I think, would be compelling in a general election, and I would give him a B+.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
And I would be worried about him against Joe Biden. So yeah, I would give him a B- overall, C- in the primary, B+ in general.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's where Tim Scott stands for me. Whew. All right. Maybe I should have taken a Tylenol before I did this. We got Ron DeSantis up next.
What's your name? I'm Tim Hampton. Okay. How are you? I'm wonderful. Great to be up.
So Ron DeSantis is another Floptina, really. Jennifer Floptes. Jennifer Flopez. Rhonda Floptis? No. Sorry. The governor of Florida, C- in the primary for Ron DeSantis, in my book.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Okay.
C-. And I think that that's generous because he's really flopping. He sat down with Jake Tapper last week to, I was guessing, maybe go at it with Jake and remind the Republican base where he's at. Instead, he just said that he was going to ban abortion after 6 weeks nationally if he was elected president. Said that DEI is unconstitutional because everyone knows what DEI is. That's on every Pennsylvania voter's mind is DEI. And he just, flopped. And he has a bad personality. He's a grating voice. And he's not very good. It's just, he has so much money and so many connections that you would think he'd be able to turn this ship around. He's not been able to. And I give him a C in the general election as well. I want to give him a C-, honestly, because people say he's Trump without the baggage. I believe, and this is maybe a hot take, Ron DeSantis would do worse in a general election than Donald Trump. And actually, now that I think about it, my scoring does not reflect that. So just ignore the scoring because it's not consistent and I don't care. Okay? Ron DeSantis is worse than Donald Trump in terms of a general election prospect. The only reason that he makes the news nationally outside of Florida is because he's done something crazy like just this past week when his Board of Education said that now Florida public schools are going to be teaching that slaves benefited from slavery. What suburban mom do you think is getting that headline and thinking, look at this chastened moderate. Perhaps I'll vote for him. No, Ron DeSantis is perceived very much as a very far-right, culture war-obsessed person. His feud with Disney is like the perfect example. Imagine going to war with the most beloved brand in America and the largest employer in your state. Just imagine that from a political standpoint. I can't. I don't know why he's doing that. He comes off as like just so childish, right? Like anyone says anything remotely bad about him, he takes the bait immediately. And Joe Biden is very good at like sort of subtly poking fun at people to the point where like if they're stupid enough, they might not really know that they're being made fun of. And we saw at the correspondence dinner, he was like really going at Ron DeSantis. So yeah, I think it's easy to get under his skin. He's not tested on the national stage. He has a temper. He's just not a good candidate at all. He reminds me of Scott Walker if Scott Walker was worse. And honestly, I think he's so politically toxic at this point. As he's run for president, his approvals in Florida have tumbled that sometime in the next decade, we will see what happened to Bobby Jindal's Louisiana and Scott Walker's Wisconsin happen to Ron DeSantis' Florida. The pendulum is going to swing back and Republicans are going to pay a pretty big price in Florida for what Ron DeSantis has done with a 6-week abortion ban in one of the most pro-choice states in the country. It's going to be harder for public school students in the state of Florida to get into good colleges now. All I'm trying to say is we've seen this happen so many times before, where someone is holed up in a governor's mansion somewhere out in the country. They do well locally, and people think that that's a signal that they're going to do well nationally. So you get all these strategists who to go and kiss the ring, give them money if they're a big fundraiser. All the while, this candidate is not getting the kind of road experience that they need out on the national stage. Ron DeSantis is just another iteration of Bobby Jindal and Scott Walker and all these candidates who have come before who just are told that they're perfect and they're not. And in fact, they're actually very poor quality candidates. And so, yeah, that's where I would put Ron DeSantis. And I just think that he is such a bad politician. Tell us how you really feel. So with a C- in the primary, C in the general. I give him a C overall, and I honestly think that that's generous because he's just such a poor candidate. Okay, so next up, you know him, you love him, you don't love him. He's not my favorite either. Mike Pence.
Hola, I'm Mike Pence.
So Mike Pence, who is running to be the nominee of a party that tried to kill him, is not in a good spot. Things are not good at Mike Pence Town, USA. He has raised a dismal $1.4 million, which compared to Joe Biden, who hauled in $70 million, this is small potatoes, especially for a former vice president. Think about what a former vice president does in a primary. These are the heirs apparent, right? Joe Biden, former vice president, obviously, I don't think he was planning on running for president, but duty calls. The example I always think of is Richard Nixon. I don't know why, because there are better examples, like George H.W. Bush, Al Gore. The reason I bring up the fundraising and the former incumbent vice president is because Mike Pence has not yet raised enough money from enough different people to qualify for the first Republican presidential debate, which will be in a few weeks. So that is just a shocking state of affairs for someone like Mike Pence. Former vice president of the United States, Donald Trump's running mate twice, might not qualify for the first debate. And if you don't qualify for the first debate, you have to drop out, right? Like, just from a political standpoint, if you're not on the debate stage, you're not going to be the nominee. You're not going to be president. It's just that simple. If you're a former vice president, you are supposed to be, at least, the second most prominent person in your party. It's bad. It's not good. With that being said, you know, his campaign is just not being run correctly. It's not being run well. He's trying to run to the right of the other candidates on social issues. So, like, for example, and like I said, that doesn't work because the Republican Party doesn't care about policy so long as you are a conservative. In the Trump era, what they care about is the strongman attitude, the being crass and, you know, elbowing your way to the front of the line. That's what they like. They like the brutishness. They like the autocratic tendencies. They like it. That's what's really disturbing about all this. But thankfully, the general electorate is not super into that. So if there is a God, the Republican Party might be, you know, tearing itself up from the inside out. Who knows? Anyway, so Mike Pence, he's the only Republican presidential candidate to have come out. This is so stupid, by the way. I don't know why he decided to do this. This is so dumb. He decided to come out as right? Isn't that funny because it's Mike Pence? Anyway, he decided to come out as the only Republican candidate for president who supports a complete national and total ban on abortion. The fact that he thought that would be a good idea and not a bad one is stupid. It's stupid. And so it signals to me both weakness in the primary, because anyone who knows anything knows that that's not how you win a Republican primary in the year of our Lord, 2023. And it's bad in the general election because it's awful. It's political suicide if you're trying to run for president to say that you support an exceptionless ban on abortion in this political environment. Maybe you get away with saying that in the early 2000s. Maybe you get away with saying that under the sort of like days that voters were in before where they thought Roe was settled precedent. But now that it's not, politicians aren't getting away with that anymore. And Mike Pence is not going to if he makes it that far. D+ in the primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
I honestly think that just to protect his dignity, he's going to drop that in the next few weeks. Not qualifying for the first debate is just really bad. He might be the first to drop out, frankly, if it's not Larry Elder.
What was that?
You need to leave.
I just D+ in the primary because he's not doing what he needs to do, and D+ in the general.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Because the harder he goes on the primary, the worse that he makes the job for himself in the general. Because now there are like a gajillion sound bites of Mike Pence talking about how he wants to ban abortion completely and totally. How he's the most pro-life person on the stage. Abortion is going to be a really important issue in this election. And the fact that Mike Pence is out there trying to use this as a foothold to get some evangelical support is stupid. It's stupid, especially when you're going up against Donald Trump, who put the 3 justices who killed Roe on the court. He has earned like a lifetime evangelical stamp of approval for that, because that's like the capstone of the evangelical movement in America, is to ban abortion. It's bad in the primary. It's terrible in the general. And it just sucks. So yeah, D+ overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
All right, next we've got Christie.
No off-topic questions. Because I don't want to. No, permission denied. That's an off-topic questions. Next, you have been stopped.
Former Trump jockey turned aspiring MSNBC contributor, Christopher J. Christie. He is running an anti-Trump campaign. Obviously. He is living in New Hampshire. Newsflash, he's not going to win New Hampshire. Because Chris Christie's running an anti-Trump campaign, that's not going to, he's not going to get very far. So I think in the primary, I'd just give him a D- because you can't be anti-Trump and win this primary field.
You have been stopped.
That being said, I think that Chris Christie is doing what he is seeking to accomplish effectively. He is a rare voice of criticism in the GOP in that, look, even there are people like Asa Hutchinson and Hurd and some of these more like mealy-mouthed conservatives who will openly attack Trump, but they make an argument that is basically moot. And that is, look, this isn't who we are, right? We need to be more decent as a party. We are the party of Lincoln. We need to be, better than this. We are better than this. And Chris Christie's not making that argument. And this leaves all to the side the Mike Pences, the Nikki Haleys, the people who will, after, there will be some headline that's like, Donald Trump choked DOD official for not letting him bomb cartels. And then all these GOP challengers will tweet something like, leadership is about experience. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, who is this for? And Chris Christie isn't doing that. Chris Christie is going on Fox News and being a real pit bull. He's getting under Trump's skin and he's just taking shots, Trump style, which we haven't seen before. Take the classified documents case, for example. Someone will ask Chris Christie on Morning Joe or something. They'll be like, Chris, we're all asking ourselves why. Why do you think Donald Trump did this? I agree with Chris Christie on this. Chris Christie says it's because of his ego. It's because he wanted to play president with his presidential toys. Are you kidding? That's too funny. That's too good. And Trump saw that and he was like, that pissed Trump off because that's exactly the kind of thing he hates, right? And that's exactly what he does to his opposition is he paints them as childish or, they're lesser men than he is. And I think Chris Christie does a good job with that with Trump. Although Trump is just like, haha, you're fat. And then Chris Christie's like, okay, buddy. But yeah, with that being said, Chris Christie's argument as a candidate is only 50% of the way there because he attacks Trump. Yeah, but that is nothing without an alternative, right? And Chris Christie doesn't have to be that alternative for the message to work. But if you have 15 alternatives, it doesn't work. If they're all polling 5%, doesn't work. So yeah, D- in the primary, D in the general.
You have been stopped.
Just because no one likes Chris Christie, right? He's sorry. Sorry, Chris. This sounds like such a read, but I'm sorry. Chris Christie is more built for being the rough and tumble U.S. attorney from the District of New Jersey. The governor who gets the streets plowed and occasionally shuts down the beach so he can go there with his family. So D- primary, D general, D overall.
You have been stopped.
Sorry, Chris. All right. Next, we've got Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum.
I grew up in a tiny town in North Dakota. Woke was what you did at 5 a.m. to start the day.
He is the current governor of North Dakota, which is probably why you have never heard of him. And I actually happen to think that Doug Burgum is something of an underrated talent here. Dougie boy, Dougie Fresh. One of his parents died, and then he went on, welfare. And then he went on to start a giant multi-billion-dollar tech company in North Dakota. So he's sort of got this interesting story where, much like Tim Scott, he has an excellent answer to the why question, which is, America worked for me. I was a small kid who was on welfare in flyover state. I made it out, and then I came back and I gave back to my community. That's what America's about. That's a very compelling message. And so I think that there's something there because, it's inspiring, but I think that it coexists well with the white grievance politics of the Republican Party, which sounds terrible that I'm saying it out loud, but it's it does, right? He came from one of these forgotten rural communities and, made a name for himself through American capitalism. I think that that's a message that wouldn't get, completely eaten alive. I think without the distraction of Trump, he would certainly be one to watch. But the thing is, right, he's another one of these multi-billionaires, right? Actually, I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's very wealthy. And he's basically bankrolling his entire campaign. And I think he's just trying to get his name ID up so that, you know, well-to-do staffers will come and work for him. But this guy's got something, I think. And it's a shame because no one knows who he is. But it's also not a shame because Biden 2024, you know what I'm saying? So for the primary, I give him a B.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Which I think is a bit generous because he is not doing a ton of interviews. Like I was talking about with Mike Pence, right? You need 40,000 individual donors and you need a certain fundraising haul. Most candidates don't have a problem getting the requisite amount of money that they need to qualify, but a lot of them have trouble getting 40,000 different donors. The way Doug Burgum worked his way around this was he created an infinite money hack where he gave away $20 gift cards to people who donated $1 to his campaign so he could get 40,000 different donors. And what do you know? He got it. So he's going to be at the first debate. That being said, I think he's going to eventually drop out. He certainly does have the cash to get him to South Carolina, but I don't think there's an opening for him yet. But, you know, he'd be one to watch. So I give him a B in the primary. In the general, I give him a C+.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Again, low name ID, very conservative on social issues. But, you know, he's got a good story. Guy from a state like North Dakota. Again, it's just maybe C+ is a little harsh. Because the primary was generous, the general was harsh. I think I'm good sticking with my B- overall score for Mr. Governor Burgum.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Ugh. The further you get down the list, like, the funnier these people get. Next, we have Francis Suarez.
Will you be talking about the Uyghurs in your campaign?
What? The what?
The Uyghurs.
What's a Uyghur?
You really need to know about the Uyghurs, Mayor.
So would you call it a Weeble?
The mayor of Miami. So Francis Suarez is obviously a foreign policy expert.
So would you call it a Weeble?
No, I'm kidding. I believe he's in his 40s. And Francis Suarez is definitely running a campaign. That's for sure. He's another one of these low name ID people. Is kind of his biggest problem. He's not really doing the work to get out there and get his name heard, to get on these interviews like Vivek is. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he's not a multi-billionaire like Vivek, but still, he's not really offering anything that anyone's looking for. I think this is just an opportunity to, like, dip his toes in, prime himself for maybe a Senate run in the future or something like that. I don't really know. I do like the onslaught that we're seeing of mayors running for president because I think that it's an underrated job. Like, I think there are a lot of mayors in this country who would be better fit for the presidency than senators. It's an executive job. So yeah, I love the influx of new mayors. And I would just say to Aftab Puraval, the mayor of Cincinnati, I discovered you before Liz Smith did, and I would have worked for you if I was old enough. Number 2 is I would say, please run for president someday. We love you. Anyway, Francis Suarez, C- in the primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Because he's not doing anything special. Not knowing who the Uyghurs are is not a career-ending move in today's Republican Party. Obviously, for the general election, not great. D in the general.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Especially if you're a young candidate, gaffes like that just are not good. So yeah, D, C-, D+ overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Nothing special from Mayor Francis. Sorry, buddy. Last but not least, we have Will Hurd.
Donald Trump is running to stay out of prison. And if we elect... I know.
So Will Hurd is a former U.S. representative from Texas's 23rd district. I actually met Will Hurd, and I got to ask him a question. I forget what the question was, but I met him over Zoom. So I don't know if that really counts. Anyway, centrist Republican, regaled in Politico magazine as the future of the GOP. As I'm sure you can imagine, he's running an anti-Trump campaign, which puts him at an F in the primary.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
The reason it's an F and not a D is because Will Hurd is not doing this right at all. He is running as an anti-Trump Republican, but he's not doing it in the effective way that Christie is. He's doing it in the crappy way that Asa Hutchinson is. And he doesn't seem to be of the sober-minded persuasion that Christie and Asa Hutchinson are, that are like, I'm not winning this primary. I'm just here to sling some dirt on Trump in the hopes that it will help redirect my party. Maybe that's Will Hurd's objective. It doesn't really seem like it because in his announcement video, he just spends the first half attacking Joe Biden and talking about inflation. And I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Where are we going here with this? Especially because he entered super late. No one knows who he is. So Will Hurd not running the right anti-Trump campaign tonally, nor the right campaign overall tonally, because he's given his attacks on Joe Biden, he seems to be under the impression that he's going somewhere with this, and I just don't think he is. However, because he is this talented, frankly, politician, and I think he could do big things, on an alternate timeline, I would say he's an A- general election candidate.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
He's young, he's a man of color, he's got centrist views, very socially progressive, but, you know, the fact that he's not getting far at all in this primary, he's not doing the primary part right, and the general election prospects are just merely a dream scenario that's like literally has a 0% chance of manifesting, D+ overall.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
So those are all of the candidates, and if we rank them against each other-ish, to the best of my ability, like I said, this grading system is not 100% consistent. What do you want from me? Consistency? Accuracy? Come on. In this economy? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I don't care. Math is not my strong suit. So, if we're going to go through the rankings based on all of that. At number 12, we have Sir Larry Elder.
What was that?
At number 11, Asa Hutchinson. Number 10, Will Hurd. Number 9, Francis, the foreign policy hawk, Suarez. Number 8, we've got Christie. Number 7, hola, it's Mike Pence. And number 6, none other than DJT, Donald Trump. Number 5, Ron DeSanctimonious. Sorry, it's so funny. Today, I actually saw on Twitter, Ron DeSantis posted, or his campaign war room or whatever, the thing that's run by all the 12-year-olds, they retweeted this video that had a Nazi symbol in it. It's like, you can't make this stuff up. He's just so bad at this. He's so bad at it, and he's such an extreme person. So that's Ron DeSantis. Number 4, Tim Scott. How you doing, North Charleston?
Hello, North Charleston!
So awkward. So awkward. Number 3, our boy, Doug Burgum. It doesn't get old for me, although I'm sure it got old for you a long time ago. Number 2, Nikki Haley. Don't undercut Nikki Haley. Number 2, Nikki Haley. Number 1, none other than Vivek Ramaswamy. So yeah, that's where they all stand. So thank you so much for humoring me as I go through these rankings that are all correct, by the way, because my opinions are correct. If you liked this, let me know. Maybe I'll do something like this again. But if I get heckled off the internet, so be it. I'm a woman of the people. I can respect when I'm not welcome. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you liked this. See you all later. Take care.
They can't shut me up now. I'm going to be the next U.S. president. And believe me, we're delivering accountability to every one of those agencies. And yes, that includes the FDA. And believe me,